This story is part of a first-person series on house hunting in LA. To read more about what's it like to buy a house in Los Angeles right now, click here. No Los Angeles house hunting store would be complete without mentioning gentrification. At the center of this hot-button issue is Boyle Heights, and not far from it is South LA, one of the neighborhoods in our home search. It's not breaking news nor an exaggeration that LA's got a housing crisis on its hands. A lack of affordable housing, rising home prices, increasing income disparity, and historic redlining, a map by the government-backed Homeowners Loan Corporation in 1939 that crystallized discriminatory lending practices and reinforced racial and class bias in homeownership, writes KCET's Ryan Reft, have created a recipe that angrily swirls into the City of Angels melting pot narrative. As two college grads with fairly suburban upbringings who bring in slightly more than the LA median income, my husband and I looked at buying property in South LA as an investment opportunity. We reasoned that if we lived there for 3 to 5 years, we'd reap the economic benefits of the soon-to-open Crenshaw Metro line and the Rams Stadium. In our naivete, we didn't immediately consider that our quest to own a home might lead to another Angelino's displacement. Like many other self-professed mindful citizens, we recycle our fancy glass kombucha bottles, kidding, maybe, try to buy locally made goods, and pick up cage-free organic eggs. But in our naivete, we didn't immediately consider that our quest to own a home might lead to another Angelino's displacement. The neighborhood experts, community leaders, and local officials I spoke with agree that this is main issue in the gentrification debate. Before we get to the solution of how not to be a gentrifier, the person who buys a short-term home in a low-income area with the intention of flipping, or a new resident who's unwilling to be part of the community, according to LA neighborhood experts, it's necessary to first unravel the subject. The displacement issue is absolutely critical in defining gentrification, says Dana Cuff, UCLA City Lab Director and Professor of Architecture and Urban Design. Most people indeed think of their homes as investments, and everybody wants to see their neighborhoods improve, but the problem is people are displaced unwillingly and they're priced out of the market in one way or the other, she tells me. Low-income renters are the Angelinos most vulnerable to displacement, Cuff says. Although my husband and I previously rented, our steady paychecks and job stability afforded us options when it came down to choosing a new neighborhood. That's not an advantage shared by many others in LA. In the past, there's been neighborhood change, that's where the whole filtered down theory came from, explains Cuff. But that doesn't work anymore, because there's not enough housing and almost all the housing being built is only affordable to a very small category of people. Gentrification is the newest manifestation of how low-income people continue to get hurt, says Rudy Espinosa, executive director of the nonprofit organization Leadership for Urban Renewal Network. We're saying, you should be able to buy a house, you should just save money, but when you're making $35,000 or less, how do you ever catch up, he says. It's a symptomatic of a capitalist system that is run on a speculative real estate market where values of property magically go up every year. It's a system that helps people who already have money, he adds, and it's leaving the majority of us behind. Boyle Heights residents witnessed this in neighboring and now gentrified communities like Echo Park, Silver Lake, and Highland Park, says Stephen Almazan, a public policy master's student at UC Berkeley and former Boyle Heights neighborhood council member who spent 2 years as a special education teacher at Kipsall Academy in East LA. As new residents began moving to those neighborhoods in the mid-2000s, rents increased and pushed low-income renters east to Frogtown, Highland Park, MT, Washington, and Lincoln Heights, to name a few, he says. Sitting inside local beloved La Moscata Bakery, which recently underwent its own revitalization about a mile south from gentrification battleground Weird Wave Coffee Roasters, Almazan explains why residents at Boyle Heights, a community whose roots in activism was documented in the film East LA Interchange and has become the symbol of the anti-gentrification movement, are defending their neighborhood so zealously. Enter the controversial openings of Weird Wave and art-washing galleries like the No-Shuttered Piston Boyle Heights, which have pushed the East LA community in the national spotlight. The media has painted the scene as either you're for the businesses moving in or you're for the protesters who want to keep them out, says Almazan. But more people are actually in the middle. They appreciate good coffee but don't want to contribute to the eventual displacement of families years down the line. The efforts of anti-gentrification activists are more symbolic than anything, he says. Artisanal coffee roasters and art galleries are not the sole cause of gentrification, but they're definitely part of the process, regardless of the intention of the coffee shop owners, he says. The conversation should instead focus on how newcomers, residents and businesses alike, can integrate within the community. In the case of Weird Wave, Almazan says the owners should have first determined how to best serve the needs of Boyle Heights, where the median income is $34,000. Though investing, capital or otherwise, in communities also increases the city's revenue, Almazan has a few of his own ideas for creating healthy communities with mixed incomes, especially in areas that have a track record for resisting low-income housing. Linkage fees are a great step, he says. But he also wants to see more housing policies that give incentives to home buyers to live in a neighborhood for at least a decade, prevent Arab-style apartments, or keep people from flipping homes within a year, to name a few. Luz Aralia Ibarra, senior city planner with the Los Angeles Department of City Planning, says the city continues to find ways to boost and encourage the production of affordable housing. She cites California's density bonus program and the recently signed unapproved dwelling unit ordinance, a voluntary program which allows property owners to legalize qualifying unpermitted units, assuming all life safety conditions are met. Finding long-lasting solutions to fit the needs of each community is challenging, and what may work for one community may not work for another, she says. Complicating things further is the fact that LA is not static, says UCLA's Cuff. You can look at any city, and it's always either getting better or getting worse from somebody's perspective. It's either getting more expensive or getting less expensive, and any change will always be in and against someone's favor, she says. LA's ever-evolving nature exaggerates the process that leads to gentrification. In LA's current seller's market, it's easy for buyers to adopt a no-holds-barred approach, as we did, in order to beat the already cutthroat competition. When it comes to seeking homes in right before gentrification areas, it's likely that we aren't the only ones who forget to consider who'll be displaced. At the end of the day, if you're going to buy in a low-income area, you're going to displace someone, says Almazan. I don't want to see this as a zero-sum game, but how can we leverage the opportunity that already exists in the neighborhood? It's a harsh reality. Throughout our home search, my husband and I realized that our problems are first world compared to the challenges of other residents with far lower incomes. As the labor-born daughter of Filipino immigrants, I wanted to be mindful of Angelinos whose paths may mirror that of my parents and grandparents. If we moved to South LA, we'd vow to be the kind of people who our neighbors could count on to watch their homes while they're away and be active members of the community, and yes, send our kids to public school. So how can prospective LA home buyers be more mindful in choosing where to live? Another way of looking at this might be to ask, what does it mean to be a member of the 21st century neighborhood, says Cuff. You don't necessarily need to be a homeowner who's heavily involved in local politics while opting to send your child to a public school instead of a charter or private one. But I think we need to do some of those things and contribute in some way to the collective vision of our neighborhood, she says.